Here is a number that ruled the world for 300 years and almost never changed. If you were born in England in 1540, you could expect to live to about 38. Born 260 years later, in 1800, about 38. 10 generations. Plague, war, kings, revolutions, and the most basic fact of human life sat almost perfectly still. And then, in the span of a single lifetime, it nearly doubled. This is the story of that line, of the lie hidden inside it, and of why it just started moving the wrong way. This is the long series. For most of recorded English history, staying alive was a coin flip you took every winter. The line you're watching is real, reconstructed parish by parish, baptism by burial, by the demographers Wrigley and Schofield, covering 1541 to 1871. And it tells you something strange. Progress, for most of the past, simply didn't exist. Good decades and bad decades, harvests and famines, the number drifted between the low 30s and the low 40s and went nowhere. There was no upward trend to find. A child born under Queen Elizabeth and a child born under King George faced almost identical odds. By the 1730s, the line actually fell to around 32, as the cities swelled and killed people faster than the countryside could replace them. But here's where almost everyone gets it wrong. A life expectancy of 38 does not mean people drop dead at 38. It means the average was dragged down by the very young. Around 1 in 4 English infants died before their first birthday. Nearly half never reached the end of childhood. An average is just arithmetic. And when you average a baby who lived one day with a blacksmith who lived 60 years, you get a number that describes neither of them. So survive to 20, and your odds transformed. A 30-year-old could expect 20, 30 more years. Grandparents were not a myth. Shakespeare lived to 52, Newton to 84. The graveyard was real, but it was front-loaded with the small. So if you want to move that line, you don't chase old age. You go after the cradle. And for 300 years, nobody could. The killers were invisible. Dirty water, contaminated milk, dysentery, measles, smallpox, whooping cough. No one knew that disease traveled in water and on hands, because no one knew germs existed. You could be the richest family in the parish and still bury half your children. Then, in 1854, a London doctor named John Snow traced a cholera outbreak to a single public water pump on Broad Street and had its handle removed. He couldn't see the bacterium, but he could see the pattern in the dead, and the pattern pointed at the water. The problem had never been money. It was knowledge, and the knowledge was finally arriving. What happened next is the single most important bend in this entire chart. Around 1870, the line does something it had never done in 3 centuries. It rises, and it keeps rising. Not because of one miracle, but because of plumbing. Cities learned to separate sewage from drinking water. London built its great sewers. Milk was inspected and pasteurized. Streets were cleaned. Slums were opened up. And the idea that washing your hands could save a life went from heresy to public law. The first great leap in human longevity was not one in hospitals or laboratories. It was one in pipes, drains, reservoirs, and the unglamorous offices of public health boards. Clean water saved more lives than any single drug in history. And then came the second wave. Because once sanitation had pushed the line up, medicine arrived to push it further than plumbing alone ever could. A vaccine for smallpox became vaccines for diphtheria, for tetanus, for measles, the diseases that had emptied nurseries for centuries. In the 1940s, penicillin and the antibiotics that followed meant an infected cut or a case of pneumonia was no longer a death sentence. Childhood immunization spread across the world. For the first time, humanity could not only keep the water clean, it could reach into the body and stop the disease itself. The cradle, at last, was winning. Now watch what the line does. In 1841, a 5-year-old English child could expect to reach 60. Today, that same child can expect to reach 82. And it isn't just England. In 1800, no country on earth had a life expectancy above 40. The global average was under 30. Today it's 73. The economist Angus Deaton calls it the Great Escape, humanity's breakout from a prison of early death that had held since the very beginning. And crucially, this was never only about saving babies. Look closely, and people began living longer at every age. The young survived childhood, yes, but the old also grew older. The whole of human life stretched out. And notice the speed. What took Britain the better part of 2 centuries to achieve, many countries have done in 50 years or less, compressing the entire escape into a single human lifetime. A child born in Japan or Switzerland today can expect to live past 84. 200 years ago, that was not a long life. It was an impossible one. It's tempting to think the line only goes up. That longer life is a ratchet, locked in, irreversible. It is not. In the United States, life expectancy peaked in 2014 at 78.9 years. Then it fell. By 2021, it had dropped to 76.1, the steepest sustained decline in a century. The causes weren't medieval. They were COVID-19. And before it and after it, a slow epidemic of drug overdoses. The same arithmetic that once hid dead infants now hides something else. Deaths of the young and the middle-aged, pulling a rich country's average backwards. There was a partial recovery after 2021, but the lesson stands. The escape, it turns out, can be reversed, which brings us back to the warning this channel keeps returning to. A life expectancy is a single number standing in for millions of different lives. It always has been. In the past, it buried the babies. Today, it can bury the overdose, the postcode, the gap between rich and poor. Within a single city, the wealthiest neighborhoods can outlive the poorest by 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, a gap as wide as the one between entire nations. 2 people born in the same country, in the same year, can live profoundly different lengths of life, depending on where and to whom they were born. The average is true. It's just never the whole truth. So here's the shape, end to end. 3 centuries of a coin flip, a doctor and a pump handle, a bend around 1870 won by clean water, and a second climb won by medicine, a near vertical escape that doubled a human life. And at the very tip, a wobble that reminds us none of it is guaranteed. Read the shape of the trend, not the single number, and never forget whose deaths are folded inside the average. We've now measured what a day's work bought, what bread cost, and how long you had to spend it. Next time, how many hours your ancestors actually worked to earn that life, and why the answer is the opposite of what you'd guess. This is the Long Series. Subscribe, and we'll keep reading the long lines together.